At 6:02 in the morning, while the sky was still grey and the mist was rising off the water like breath from a sleeping animal, the police arrived at the lake. Two cruisers rolled down the dirt road, tires crunching against gravel loud enough to wake the birds. Their lights weren't flashing, but their presence felt heavy anyway, like something bad had already happened and nobody had said it out loud yet. The lake was calm, glassy, untouched. A single fishing line cut across the surface, perfectly still. Sebastian was standing on the dock when they pulled up. He hadn't even had time to make coffee yet. He'd been awake since 5, same as always. The early hours were the only time the world felt quiet enough to breathe. His hands shook slightly as he adjusted the reel, not from the cold, but from the nerves that never fully left after the war. The lake had always helped with that. His grandfather used to say water carried away the noise in your head if you gave it time. That morning, Sebastian had just cast his line when the first cruiser door opened. "Sir," one of the officers called out, voice professional but stiff, "we need to speak with you." Sebastian turned slowly. He didn't move toward them. He didn't reach for anything. He just stood there, rod in one hand, boots planted on the dock his grandfather had built 40 years earlier. "What's going on?" he asked. The officer checked a clipboard. "We received a complaint about illegal fishing on a community lake." Sebastian blinked once. Then again. "This is my lake," he said. The officer hesitated. "That's not what we were told." Sebastian let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but wasn't. "Who told you?" "Homeowners Association, Pine Valley Estates." For a second the world felt unreal. The lake, the ranch, the water. All of it had belonged to his family since before the HOA even existed. His grandfather had fought developers in court twice to keep it that way. The property lines were older than most of the houses downhill. "This isn't a community lake," Sebastian said. "It's private property. I own the water rights. I have the deed." The second officer shifted his weight. "Sir, we're just responding to a call. We need to verify." Sebastian walked to the small storage box by the dock and pulled out a folded document sealed in plastic. He handed it over. The officer studied it, then radioed someone. They stood there for several minutes while the sun crept higher and the mist began to burn away. Finally, the officer cleared his throat. "Looks like you're correct. Sorry for the disturbance." Sebastian nodded. He didn't smile. The cruisers drove away, leaving behind tire tracks and silence. He thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. At 6:19 a.m., his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. "Hello?" A woman's voice came through, sharp and controlled. "This is Vivian Blackwood, president of Pine Valley Estates, Hoa." Sebastian already felt the tension in his chest before she finished speaking. "You caused quite a scene this morning," she said. "Bringing the police into a community matter is very disruptive." "You called them," Sebastian replied. "I called because you're violating community standards," she said. "Fishing on that lake disturbs residents' meditation hours." "My lake," he repeated. "On my land." "You inherited it, yes," she said. "Like that changed something. But it affects our residents, therefore it concerns us." Sebastian closed his eyes for a moment. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want you to stop fishing immediately," she said, "until the HOA resolves this. And if I don't, there will be consequences." The line went dead. Sebastian stood on the dock and stared at the water. The lake didn't care about HOAs or meditation schedules or complaints. It just existed, like it always had. But down the hill, in houses that hadn't existed 10 years earlier, people were already watching him. That same morning, an email arrived from Alpine Resort. Subject line, "Water Rights Agreement Status Update." Sebastian opened it with dirt still on his fingers. "We regret to inform you that due to ongoing legal uncertainty surrounding the lake and water access, we must pause negotiations until the dispute is resolved." Pause negotiations meant cancelled deal, the deal that would have paid off the ranch mortgage, the deal that would have covered his parents' cancer treatments, the deal that was supposed to keep the land in the family. $6.8 million vanished because someone didn't like how fishing looked from her patio. Sebastian sat down on the dock. The fishing rod slipped from his hand and clattered onto the wood. He didn't notice. By noon, there were 3 cars parked near his gate with people inside pretending to check their phones. By evening, someone had posted in the HOA group chat that the fisherman was back. By night, floodlights from the houses downhill pointed toward his water like interrogation lamps. And all of it started with that knock at 6:02 a.m. The unfairness of it hit harder than anger. He had done everything right. He served his country. He came home broken and built something with his hands. He took care of his parents. He stayed out of trouble. He kept to himself. And still they came, not with guns, not with fists, with complaints, with rules, with threats written on letterhead. By the next morning, a printed notice was taped to his gate. Unauthorized use of community amenities is prohibited. Continued violations will result in fines. He tore it down and crumpled it in his fist. That was the moment he understood something important. This wasn't about fishing. This was about control. And if he didn't push back now, they wouldn't stop at the lake. They would come for the land, the cattle, the water, everything his grandfather had protected. So when the line tightened that morning and the fish tugged beneath the surface, Sebastian didn't reel it in. He stood there, watching the houses below him, knowing somewhere behind those windows, someone was already planning the next move. And that was how the war over a quiet lake began. Not with shouting, not with fists, but with a phone call at dawn that changed everything, before anyone called the police, before the emails, before the threats and the meetings and the watching eyes on the hill. There was just Sebastian and the land. He was 38 years old, but most mornings he looked older, not because of wrinkles or grey hair, but because his body carried weight that never fully went away. The kind of weight you get from explosions and sleepless nights, and memories that don't ask permission before showing up. His right leg still ached when the weather shifted. His left shoulder never quite worked right after the shrapnel, and some nights, no matter how tired he was, he couldn't fall asleep because his brain thought it was still overseas. The doctors called it PTSD. Sebastian just called it the noise. That was why he woke up early, 5 a.m. every day, without an alarm, when the ranch was quiet, when the sky was still dark blue instead of bright and demanding, when the lake was smooth and forgiving and didn't ask him to explain anything. The ranch had been in his family for almost 40 years. 200 acres of grass, trees, fences and water tucked into a valley that used to be nothing but ranches and dirt roads. His grandfather bought it in the late 80s with money he made welding pipelines. No inheritance, no trust fund. Just a man with strong hands and a stubborn belief that land should be protected, not flipped for profit. When Sebastian was a kid, the ranch was his entire universe. He learned to fish before he learned multiplication. He learned to mend fences before he learned how to drive. He learned that animals didn't care who you were, only how you treated them. His grandfather taught him that water was life, that if you owned the water you could keep your land, that if you lost it, everything else followed. That was why he fought developers in court twice when they tried to buy the lake and turn it into a recreational feature for future homes. This isn't a pond, his grandfather used to say. It's a promise. When Sebastian turned, 18, he left the ranch for the army. He didn't leave because he hated the place. He left because he thought he could protect something bigger. 2 tours later, he came home with medals and injuries and a quietness that scared his mother. He didn't talk much anymore. Didn't sit with his back to doors. Didn't like crowds. But when he stood on the dock and cast a line into the lake, his shoulders relaxed in a way they never did anywhere else. The ranch became his therapy, not the talking kind, the working kind. He raised grass-fed cattle, sold beef to local restaurants, drove to farmers' markets himself because he didn't trust anyone else to explain what went into raising it. He fixed fences with one hand and stubbornness. He built sheds, repaired irrigation lines, walked the property every evening like a guard making rounds. When his grandfather died 3 years earlier, the ranch passed to Sebastian, not because anyone else wanted it, but because he was the only one who loved it the same way. His parents lived in town, 15 minutes away, both of them sick. His mother had breast cancer. His father had lymphoma. The treatments were relentless. Chemotherapy schedules ran their lives. Insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Bills stacked up in a neat pile on the kitchen table like a quiet threat. Sebastian paid what he could, sold a few cows he wanted to keep, skipped repairs he should have done, stopped replacing worn boots and started taping them. He never complained. Because the ranch wasn't just his job, it was his inheritance, his responsibility, and his shield. Every fence post was something he could fix. Every calf born was proof that life still worked. Every sunrise over the lake felt like permission to keep going. That's why the deal with Alpine Resort mattered so much. They didn't want his land. They wanted his water rights. The lake fed into a stream that flowed downhill toward land Alpine planned to turn into a high-end resort. Golf courses, artificial ponds, luxury cabins. They needed a steady water source, and his grandfather's water rights were older than anyone else's. $6.8 million. Enough to pay off the ranch mortgage, cover his parents' treatments, set aside money so he wouldn't have to worry every winter, and still keep the land exactly as it was. He planned to sell only the rights, not the lake. Keep fishing, keep the cattle, keep the promise. It was the first time in years he felt like he could breathe without counting dollars. He didn't party, didn't travel, didn't buy toys. He bought medical equipment for his dad. He paid off his mom's credit card. He fixed the barn roof. That was his idea of success. Down the hill from his ranch, things had changed. What used to be open pasture became a neighborhood called Pine Valley Estates. 47 homes with stone gates and trimmed hedges, and people who called the sheriff when cows wandered too close to their driveways. They had an HOA. They had meditation hours. They had rules about grass height and mailbox colors. Sebastian didn't go down there unless he had to. He waved when neighbors waved. He nodded when they nodded. He didn't attend HOA meetings because he wasn't part of the HOA. He owned land that existed before their bylaws did. Some of the older residents liked him. Some of the newer ones treated him like enery. The lake, though, the lake bothered them. From their balconies, it looked like a feature. From his dock, it was a lifeline. To Sebastian, fishing wasn't a hobby. It was silence with purpose. It was control in a world that had taken it from him once. It was proof that patience still worked. Every morning he fed the cattle, checked the fences, and went to the water. Not to catch fish necessarily, but to remember who he was when nobody was shouting orders or firing weapons or demanding explanations. He had survived things that never made the news. He carried memories that didn't show up on scans, and he never asked for anything except to be left alone on his land. That's why what happened next mattered so much, because he wasn't some rich land baron. He wasn't a developer. He wasn't trying to build something that took from others. He was a wounded soldier trying to keep a promise to a dead man while keeping 2 living people alive. What he stood to lose wasn't just money. It was the last place that made sense, the deal that could save his parents, the proof that service meant something, the land that gave him peace. And he had no idea that people who had never milked a cow or mended a fence or watched someone fade under hospital lights were already deciding that his lake didn't belong to him. Not because of law, not because of fairness, but because they didn't like how it looked when he used it. And that was the part that hurt the most. Not the threats, not the paperwork, not even the money, but the idea that something he loved could be taken just because someone else wanted it, before the first complaint, before the first fine, before the first poll. Ice call. Sebastian was just a man doing his best on land his family had earned, and he didn't know yet that he was about to be forced to fight for all of it. The first time Sebastian heard her name, he thought it was a joke. Vivian Blackwood. It sounded like something from a soap opera, not the name of a woman who would decide she owned his lake. He saw her for the first time 2 days after the police visit. She stood at the edge of his property line with 3 other people behind her, all of them dressed like they were attending a brunch, not confronting someone on a ranch. Sunglasses, crisp jackets, phones in hand. She didn't step onto his land. She didn't need to. She knew exactly where the invisible boundary was, and she stood just far enough back to pretend she respected it. Sebastian was repairing a fence when she spoke. "You're Sebastian," she said, not asking. He turned slowly. "Who are you?" "Vivian Blackwood," she replied. "President of Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association." She said it like a title that came with authority. "We need to talk about your lake." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "There's nothing to talk about." "Oh, there is," she said. "You've been fishing in it every morning." "Yes. It disturbs residents. It's my lake." She smiled. Not friendly, not warm, the kind of smile that exists only to show teeth. "The lake is visible from our community," she said, "which makes it part of our shared environment." "That's not how ownership works. It is how impact works," she replied. She pulled out a folder and held it against her chest. "We've received multiple complaints," she continued. "Noise, visual disruption, and mental concerns." "I don't make noise." "Fishing is a form of extraction," she said, "and extraction requires community consent." Sebastian stared at her. "You called the police." She didn't deny it. "I exercised my duty as HOA president," she said, "to protect our residents." "From what?" "From you." That was when he understood. She wasn't confused. She wasn't misinformed. She wasn't mistaken. She had decided something, and now she wanted reality to catch up. Within a week, letters began arriving. Not handwritten, not friendly, official, heavy paper, stamped. The first one said he was using a community amenity without authorization. The second said he owed fines. The third said legal action would follow. Each letter referenced HOA bylaws that didn't apply to him. Each one ignored his deed. Each one assumed he would simply stop because someone told him to. When he didn't, the tone changed. "You are in violation. You are causing harm. You are subject to enforcement." She copied the entire neighborhood on every message. It wasn't about him anymore, it was about making him look like a problem. The HOA group chat exploded with comments he didn't write and couldn't answer without being dragged deeper into it. "He's selfish. He thinks he owns everything. Why should one person control the lake? He's not even part of our community." That one stung the most. He had lived there longer than most of them. Vivian began holding emergency meetings. Charts appeared, maps appeared, PowerPoint slides with red circles around his dock. She told them the lake had always been intended as a shared resource, that his grandfather had allowed access, that his fishing was a recent escalation. All of it was false, but it sounded good when she said it. She spoke like someone used to rooms listening. Sebastian attended one meeting, just one. She stood at the front of the room like a judge. "We must act collectively," she said, "or we allow one person to dictate the environment for 47 families." He raised his hand. "You're lying," he said. The room went quiet. "The lake is private," he continued. "I have the deed. I have the water rights. I have the survey." She looked at him with pity. "Documents can be challenged," she said. "Community standards cannot." That was when the threats began. Not loud ones, quiet ones. Her lawyer sent a 47-page letter. It accused him of adverse possession, improper use, violation of easements, environmental risk. It demanded he stop fishing immediately. He pay $15,000 in HOA legal fees. He submit to oversight. The letter was sent to every homeowner. She wanted him humiliated, and she wanted them scared. Someone posted his military photo in the group chat with the caption, "Is this who we want controlling our water?" Another wrote, "PTSD makes people unpredictable." Vivian never corrected them. She just said, "We are concerned about safety." Security cameras appeared, pointed at his dock. Neighbors stood near the fence pretending to walk dogs. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes. "Protect our lake, stop the pollution, hold him accountable." He was one man. She was an organization, and she used it like a weapon. She didn't want compromise. When she offered one, it was an insult. "You may fish for 2 hours on days," she said, smiling like she was generous. He laughed. "You don't get to give me permission on my land." Her face hardened. "Then you force us to act." The deal with Alpine collapsed quietly. They didn't blame Vivian, they blamed uncertainty, which was worse, because uncertainty sounded neutral. But it wasn't. It was created, on purpose, and she knew it. She began telling residents that the resort deal would damage their views, that it would commercialize the valley, that Sebastian was selling them out. None of it was true. He wasn't selling land. He wasn't building anything. He was trying to save his parents. But she never said that. She said he was greedy. That was the lie that worked. She framed him as someone hoarding a resource, when in reality she wanted control of it. She wanted the lake quiet, undisturbed, untouched, so it could be pretty. She wanted him invisible. She wanted the ranch to feel like scenery, and when he didn't disappear, she tried to make him small. Every week, something new. A noise complaint, a violation notice, a legal threat, a meeting. She spoke about him like he wasn't there. He refuses to cooperate. He is aggressive. He does not respect a community. When he stayed calm, she called it defiance. When he showed documents, she called it intimidation. When he ignored her, she called it guilt. There was no version of him that she accepted, because the truth was simple. She didn't want him gone. She wanted him controlled, and if that failed, she wanted him ruined. The abuse of power wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. It came in envelopes and emails and meetings. It hid behind woe. RDs like standards and concerns. But the intent was clear. She used the HOA like a private army. She used fear like currency. She used lies like glue. And every step she took made it harder for him to breathe, not because he was weak, but because she had turned his life into a case file. This wasn't a disagreement. It was a campaign. And the moment he realized that, the story stopped being about fishing and became about survival. After the first letters came, Sebastian thought the worst of it would be paperwork. He thought it would stay on paper. Emails, meetings, maybe a lawyer or two. Something distant. Something he could file away and deal with slowly. He was wrong. The first real change happened on a Monday morning when he drove into town for feed. When he came back, there was a bright orange notice stapled to his gate. Notice of violation. It accused him of unauthorized recreational activity and environmental endangerment. It listed a fine amount that made no sense and a deadline that wasn't legal. It wasn't even signed properly. But it looked official. That was the point. By Wednesday, 2 more notices appeared, one taped to his barn, one on the dock. Then the emails started coming daily, not from neighbors, from the HOA. You are creating conflict. You are harming property values. You are refusing to cooperate. They CC'd the entire community every time. He stopped opening them after the 5th one. Not because he didn't care, because he couldn't afford to read something that made him feel like a criminal for standing on his own land. The first time someone yelled at him, he was feeding cattle. A woman he'd never spoken to stood at the fence and shouted, "You don't belong here anymore." He didn't answer. The second time, a man filming with his phone asked, "Why do you hate the community?" Sebastian walked past him without a word. The third time, someone left a bag of trash by his gate with a note, "Take this with your fish." That night, floodlights came on from 3 houses downhill. They stayed on all night, pointed at his lake. It felt like being watched in prison. Then the lawyer letter came, 47 pages. He didn't understand most of it, but he understood the parts that mattered. Stop fishing. Pay $15,000. Submit to HOA authority. It accused him of stealing water, of damaging wildlife, of threatening neighbors. He read the last line 3 times. If you fail to comply, we will pursue all available remedies. Remedies meant lawsuits. Lawsuits meant money. Money he didn't have. His mother called that evening. Her voice sounded thin. "We got another hospital bill," she said. "I don't want to worry you, honey, but I've got it," he said. He didn't. He started selling cattle faster than he should have. He canceled repairs on the barn roof. He delayed replacing irrigation pipes that leaked. The ranch began to feel like something fragile instead of strong. Downhill, the HOA split in half. Some people believed Vivian, some didn't, but everyone talked. At the grocery store, he felt eyes on him. Someone whispered near the apples, "That's him." At church, a man avoided sitting in the same pew. At the gas station, a teenager asked, "Are you the lake guy?" The worst part was how normal it all looked from the outside. No shouting, no sir. Ends. Just small humiliations. One Saturday morning, he found 3 cameras mounted on poles along the fence line, pointed at his dock, not hidden, displayed, like a warning. He reported it. Vivian replied that they were for environmental monitoring. He started recording everything. Every time he fished, every time someone approached, every time a car parked too close. It felt like preparing for war with a notebook. Then came the flyers, anonymous, slipped into mailboxes. Protect our children, stop the lake abuse, demand accountability. They showed pictures of him holding fish, called it pollution, called it cruelty. Someone drew a red circle around his face. He stopped going to town unless he had to, not because he was afraid, because it hurt. The HOA held another meeting. This time she brought charts. Legal strategy costs money, Vivian said. We must fund enforcement. She proposed a special assessment, hundreds of dollars per household, to sue him. Half the room objected, half clapped. She called him aggressive. She called him unstable. She said the police incident proved risk. He stood up. I've done nothing wrong, he said. You are harassing me. She smiled. See, this is what we deal with. Someone shouted, sit down. Someone else shouted, let him speak. The room fractured. After that meeting, someone vandalized his dock. Planks broken, nails ripped out. The wood his grandfather had cut himself lay in pieces in the water. He didn't fix it immediately. He just stood there, staring. The police came again, this time not for fishing, for property damage. Security footage showed 2 men. One of them was Vivian's husband. The HOA called it coincidence. Then the media showed up, a small local paper. They ran her version first. HOA battles rogue landowner over shared lake. They didn't call him. They didn't ask about water rights. They didn't ask about his parents. They printed her words. His phone buzzed with messages he didn't recognize, some supportive, some cruel. One said, go back to where you came from. Another, you don't deserve that land. Another, we're watching you. His father was hospitalized that week. Sebastian slept in his truck outside the hospital. He woke up to a voicemail from an HOA attorney. You are in violation. The Alpine Resort sent another email. We cannot proceed until the dispute is resolved. The money was gone. The chance was gone. The stress didn't fade. It multiplied. Neighbors started avoiding him. Some whispered support. Most stayed silent. Friendships he didn't know he had disappeared. One night, someone tried to dump something into the lake. The camera caught it. He watched the footage alone. Someone wearing a hood poured a container into the water and ran. Tests later showed it was fertilizer, enough to harm fish, enough to send a message. He didn't tell his parents. He couldn't. Vivian called another emergency meeting. She said the lake was unsafe. She blamed him. She proposed legal action. Her lawyer withdrew 2 weeks later. Then another one did. She hired a big firm. HOA funds vanished. People started asking questions. She accused him of manipulation. He accused her of trespassing. She accused him of threats. He accused her of lies. Everyone chose sides. Some lawns went dark. Some lights stayed on. The town divided quietly. No one wanted to be the next target. Then she tried to tow his truck. Claimed it was commercial. The driver refused. Said it was harassment. That night, someone keyed his door. Leave carved into the paint. He stopped sleeping. He stopped fishing. Not because he agreed, because he needed energy to survive the day. Every step forward caused her to take 2. Every document he produced she countered with another accusation. Every calm move he made, she framed as provocation. The pressure became physical. His chest hurt. His legs shook. The ranch felt smaller. The valley felt hostile. And all of it had grown from one complaint. One lie. One woman who decided his existence was inconvenient. The situation didn't resolve. It thickened. It tightened, like a knot pulled one strand at a time. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Sebastian understood something terrifying. This wasn't about winning anymore. This was about how much damage could be done before someone stopped her. and nobody had stopped her yet. Sebastian didn't change overnight. He didn't wake up and suddenly become fearless or brilliant or calm. What changed was the way he reacted. For weeks he had been absorbing every hit like a wall that didn't know it could move. Every letter, every glare, every camera pointed at his dock felt like something he had to endure, like pain you couldn't fix, only survive. Then one morning, standing in his kitchen with an unopened OA envelope in his hand, he realized something. They were loud. He was quiet, and quiet could see things loud people missed. So he stopped reacting emotionally and started collecting. The first thing he did was set up cameras. Not cheap ones, not obvious ones. He installed professional-grade security cameras around the dock, the barn, and the fence line. He angled them to capture faces, license plates, timestamps. He tested them at night, in rain, in fog. He learned how to store footage automatically so nothing could be lost. Every time someone approached his land, it was recorded. He started keeping a logbook. Not dramatic, not angry, just facts, date, time, who, what they did, what they said. Woman in red jacket took photos of dock for 4 minutes. White SUV parked by fence, 17 minutes. Man shouted, "You don't belong." No opinions, just reality. Then he went back to the land records, not the ones he already knew, the old ones, microfilm, county archives, handwritten plats from the 80s. He found his grandfather's court filings from the first developer fight, water rights maps with handwritten notes, old surveys showing the lake boundaries drawn before Pine Valley Estates existed. He scanned everything. He organized it, not like a rancher, like a case. He contacted Frank Morrison, his grandfather's old attorney, a man in his 70s who had fought 2 land disputes and hated bullies more than paperwork. Frank listened without interrupting. Then he smiled. "She overreached," Frank said. "That's always the mistake. They didn't sue immediately. They waited." Frank told him something important. People like her destroy themselves if you give them time. Our job is to document, so Sebastian documented. When Vivian accused him of polluting the lake, he hired an independent water quality lab. They tested nitrates, bacteria, oxygen levels. The results came back clean. When she claimed fishing was harming wildlife, he contacted the state wildlife department. A biologist visited, took samples, observed fish populations. Healthy ecosystem, the report said. He added it to the file. When the HOA accused him of threatening neighbors, he saved every message he had ever sent, which was none. He didn't argue. He didn't post. He didn't respond in group chats. He let them talk. And the more they talked, the more they exposed themselves. Some neighbors began approaching him quietly. Not publicly, not online, in his driveway, in the grocery store aisle, in low voices. "She did this to us too. She fined us for the wrong paint color. She targeted our son because he's military. She charged us legal fees without a vote." One woman cried. One man brought printed emails. Another brought receipts. Sebastian didn't promise revenge. He just said, "Write it down." They did. Soon he had a folder labeled pattern. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about how she worked: selective enforcement, public shaming, legal threats, silence when challenged, escalation when resisted. Meanwhile, she kept pushing. More notices, more accusations, more meetings. She expected him to snap. He didn't. When she shouted, he stayed quiet. When she threatened, he took notes. When she insulted, he recorded. It made her angrier, which made her sloppier. One day, he noticed something strange. The people monitoring him weren't standing on HOA property. They were standing on county land, an old easement that cut behind the fence. He checked maps, confirmed it. He filed a complaint. Quietly, the county issued a warning. Vivian denied it, then doubled down. She ordered a survey. That survey revealed something else. Her own property extended into county land, and possibly into his. He didn't celebrate. He just added it to the file. Her lawyers changed, then changed again. The new firm sent louder letters. He answered with documents. When she claimed adverse possession, Frank sent back the original court ruling denying it. When she claimed easement rights, Frank sent the recorded plat showing none existed. When she claimed environmental harm, he sent lab reports. When she claimed public safety risk, he sent camera footage of calm mornings and peaceful fishing. Each time she responded with emotion. Each time he responded with evidence. The tone shifted. Neighbors noticed, not his anger, his steadiness. Some stopped pointing cameras. Some stopped sending flyers. Some started asking questions. How much money is she spending? Why are lawyers quitting? Why is she so focused on him? The HOA financials became public. 40% of dues spent on legal fees. Reserves shrinking. Special assessments looming. Sebastian never mentioned money. He mentioned facts. I own the lake. I have the rights. I have the reports. That was it. She tried to provoke him. Tried to get him to yell. Tried to get him to threaten. She accused him of stalking. He showed he stayed on his land. She accused him of aggression. He showed footage of him waving. She accused him of hiding things. He opened his files. At one meeting, she slammed a stack of papers down and said, "We will not be intimidated." Frank leaned over and whispered, "She's panicking." That was when hope appeared. Not loud, not victorious, just visible. The neighbors who once avoided him now nodded. The man who filmed him once apologized. The woman who shouted brought him soup. The story changed slowly, from problem man to targeted man, from selfish to standing alone, from troublemaker to maybe she's the trouble. Sebastian didn't feel powerful, but he felt prepared. He knew when she lied. He knew when she exaggerated. He knew when she crossed lines, and she crossed many: trespass, false reports, misuse of funds, harassment. He had dates, he had times, he had witnesses. The pressure didn't disappear, but it shifted, like wind changing direction. And for the first time since the police came to his dock, Sebastian believed something. Not that he would win, but that he wouldn't be crushed. Not that she would stop, but that she would be exposed. He stood on the dock one morning, fishing again, not to relax, but to document. The line dipped. A fish tugged. He reeled it in slowly. Cameras captured everything. Down the hill, curtains moved. He didn't look back. For the first time, he wasn't alone. He had evidence. He had allies. He had patience. And patience, he learned, was louder than threats. The day of the hearing arrived without drama. No sirens, no shouting crowds, no television trucks. Just a courtroom that smelled like old wood and coffee, and a hallway where Vivian Blackwood stood with her lawyers, speaking loudly enough for people to hear her confidence. Sebastian sat on a bench with Frank beside him, holding a folder that had grown thick over months of waiting. Vivian glanced at him once, not with fear, with annoyance, like he was something that should have moved by now and hadn't. When the judge entered, everything changed, not because of power, because of stillness. The judge listened. That was the mistake Vivian had never planned for. Her attorney began with words like community safety and environmental risk. He spoke about shared spaces and unreasonable behavior and the need for court intervention. Vivian nodded dramatically at every sentence. Then Frank stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He placed the first document on the table, Exhibit A, recorded deed from 1987. Lake and water rights belong solely to Mr. Hale. The judge read it. Frank placed another, Exhibit B, county plat showing HOA boundaries. The lake is not within them. Another, Exhibit C, wildlife report, healthy ecosystem. Another, Exhibit D, water quality tests. Another, Exhibit E, camera footage of trespass. Then came the emails, printed, time-stamped. Vivian's words appeared on a screen. We must make his life difficult. He will give up. Pressure works. Gasps moved through the room like a breeze. Her lawyer froze. Frank wasn't finished. He introduced the financials, legal bills charged without board approval, security expenses listed as community patrol, personal travel charged as inspection. Then came the vandalism footage. Her husband, 2 board members, the dock breaking. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said slowly, "did you authorize these actions?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Her lawyer whispered. She spoke anyway. "We were protecting our community." "From what?" the judge asked. Silence. The restraining order she had filed was dismissed. Her claims were declared frivolous. Sebastian was awarded attorney fees. But that wasn't the end, because the evidence didn't stop at fishing. It showed a pattern: harassment, discrimination, misuse of authority. The district attorney requested copies. The county requested copies. The HOA, Embers requested copies. That night the story broke, not as HOA versus fishermen, but as HOA president charged with abuse of power. Neighbors who had stayed quiet spoke up, one after another. "I was fined because my son is in the military. She targeted us because we work nights. She called the police on my husband for parking." The audit followed. $47,000 missing. Personal expenses hidden as legal fees. Luxury hotel stays, labeled community review. Her mansion went on the market. Her resignation came in an email with no apology. Her arrest came 2 weeks later. Felony vandalism, fraud, harassment. Her husband was charged. 2 board members were charged. The HOA collapsed. The gates opened. The cameras came down. The lake went quiet again. Sebastian stood on the dock on the morning after the charges were announced. No police, no watchers, just water. The Alpine Resort called again. The deal reopened, this time with respect. The money paid hospital bills, saved the ranch, kept the promise. The judge's ruling became precedent. Law schools cited it. News stations used it. But Sebastian didn't go on TV. He went fishing, and for the first time since 6:02 a.m. changed everything. The lake belonged to him again. When the noise finally stopped, it felt strange. For months, Sebastian had woken up expecting something to be wrong. A new letter, a new accusation, a new light pointed at the water. Even after the arrests and the rulings and the resignations, his body still waited for the next impact the way it had learned to do overseas. But nothing came. The road stayed empty in the mornings. No cars idled by the fence. No phones pointed at his dock. No flyers appeared on his gate. The lake went back to being just a lake. He started fishing again, not to document, not to prove anything, but because he missed it. The way the line cut through the surface, the way the water held the sky, the way silence felt honest again. His hands still remembered how, even when his mind didn't. The ranch slowly healed too. He fixed the dock, repaired the fence, replaced the pipes he had put off. The cattle filled the pasture again instead of half-empty space. He hired a local kid to help on weekends. They talked about nothing important and everything at the same time. His parents' treatments continued, but without the panic of unpaid bills sitting on the table. His mother smiled more. His father slept better. The weight that had been sitting in Sebastian's chest for so long loosened just enough to let him breathe normally again. Down the hill, the neighborhood changed. Not physically, but socially. People who had crossed the street to avoid him now waved. The woman who once yelled brought him pie. The man who filmed him apologized with shaking hands. Some people never said anything, but they stopped watching. The HOA dissolved and reformed with new rules. Meetings became boring again, which was exactly what they were supposed to be. No one talked about meditation hours anymore. They talked about potholes, snow removal, trash pickup, normal things. A small sign went up near the path by the lake. Private water, protected habitat, please respect boundaries. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't political. It just told the truth. Once a year now, they hold a fishing day for the kids in town. Not as an event with banners or speeches, but as something simple. Poles, bait, coolers, stories. Old men teaching kids how to tie knots. Kids teaching old men how to use phones. Sebastian stands off to the side most of the time, not because he doesn't belong, but because he doesn't need to prove he does. The land feels like land again, not a battlefield, not a courtroom. Just dirt and water and animals doing what they've always done. Sometimes when the sun sets over the lake and the wind moves through the grass, he thinks about how close he came to losing all of it without ever breaking a law. Not because he was wrong, but because someone with power decided he should be. That lesson stays with him, not as bitterness, as awareness. He learned that bullies don't always shout. Sometimes they file paperwork, sometimes they hide behind rules, sometimes they use community as a weapon. He learned that silence can look like peace when it's really fear, and he learned that the slowest path is sometimes the strongest one. Not yelling, not swinging, not threatening, recording, waiting, proving. What saved him wasn't anger, it was patience. What protected him wasn't strength, it was evidence. And what finally ended it wasn't revenge, it was exposure. The truth didn't need volume, it needed time. That became the story people told, not about fishing, not about a lake, but about what happens when someone refuses to be erased quietly. Neighbors who had their own problems began asking questions. People in nearby towns called him for advice. A veteran in another state wrote to say he was dealing with something similar. Sebastian didn't become a hero. He became a reference point. Document everything. Don't react emotionally. Know your rights. Let them show who they are. That was all he ever said. The warning spread quietly. Power that isn't checked grows bold. Authority without limits becomes personal. And rules without fairness become tools. But so does resistance. So does community. So does truth. Life didn't turn perfect. The ranch still needed work. The weather still broke things. Cancer still didn't care about justice. But something had changed. The fear was gone. The idea that he could be pushed out by paperwork no longer lived in his head. He knew now that land didn't just belong to whoever shouted loudest. It belonged to whoever stood longest. And when people ask him now what the fight was really about, he doesn't say fishing. He says, it was about whether someone else got to decide who I was on my own land. That's the part that matters. Not the villain, not the courtroom, not the headlines. The choice to stay, to document, to endure, to answer power with proof. That's what carried him through. And that's what carries the valley now. Not fear of rules, but respect for boundaries. Not silence from pressure, but quiet from peace. The lake still reflects the sky. The cattle still move with the seasons. And every morning when Sebastian steps onto the dock, there is no one watching anymore. Just water, just light, just a place that learned the difference between control and belonging. And if there is a lesson in it, it isn't loud. It's simple. You don't have to be the strongest person in the room. You don't have to be the richest. You don't even have to be the loudest. You just have to be the one who doesn't leave when you're right. Because eventually lies run out of room. And truth, even when quiet, always takes up space.